Yeah, it's, you know, and I'll just talk for 2 seconds on that.
You're the radio guy.
No, that's for you. That one's for you.
I think it's a marketing problem for you guys. I don't think it's a media problem. I don't agree entirely that we're going to be able to reach the next generation of thinkers or consumers on radio. And I make my living that way. Maybe we will. I think the kind of radio station I have, a news and information station with a local base, will be the last of them to die. You know, we may be here for hundreds, we may outlast water for all I know. But clearly, our challenges are new media. They are the internet. And I don't think it's so important how people get this information. Do you get it over AM? Do you get it over FM TV? Do you get it over a laptop? Do you get it on an iPod that you've downloaded some podcast? I'm not so concerned about how people get this information. I think what's going to doom your efforts is if you don't find a way to communicate it to me. Forget the medium, it's the message. And I don't know who your Al Gore or who your Roger, the guy that makes Roger and Me, Roger
Michael Moore.
Michael Moore.
Yeah.
You know, maybe that's a double-edged sword.
He called that one right, unfortunately.
You have to find
Roger
a way.
is gone, so is GM.
You need to find a way to communicate the urgency of this, you know.
He tried.
And Al Gore became condescending to people in some ways, and as popular as he was, I think he lost some of his appeal. I think that's a huge challenge, and when that side figures it out, my side will communicate it. But right now, we haven't sensed the urgency that you all are sharing tonight.
You know, I think there's another part of the strategy of communication that's quite interesting, and that is trying to mainstream a lot of this discussion not into specific news shows and information and public service announcements, but into regular daily entertainment. And I'm reminded of a famous example when the designated driver campaign started, which turned out to have a huge effect in this country on reducing death rates from alcohol and so on. The way that they did it, actually very consciously, was to put the designated driver issue into the sitcoms and into the daytime soap operas, the nighttime sitcoms, and so on. And there was a whole strategy that was carried out, and it had a completely galvanizing effect on having this become part of mainstream culture. I watched this very much on an issue that I've been working on for a number of years, on getting Americans interested in helping to control malaria, which is a disease we don't even have here, but is a disease which kills children, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And it was hardly known or understood here, but in recent years, for example, American Idol took this on. In their 2 days a year, American Idol Gives Back, and they explained to a whole generation of Americans watching this, what is a bed net, and how do you make a contribution? It turned out that's raised hundreds of millions of dollars. That process of getting celebrities, getting American Idol, getting others into the NBA got involved in Nothing But Nets, and so on. So we've also got to understand, go with the flow of, of put it into our daily lives in a more effective way.
But
that's your challenge.
But you're right, John. I mean, we take journalists on our fellowship programs out to the field because we think that, you can't cover the State House without going to the State House. You can't cover the police station, what journalists call the cop shop, without going down to the cop shop. You can't cover Wall Street without going to Wall Street. And we don't think you can cover the environment without getting out into the environment. But, we've heard the term breaking news stories, fires, bombings, this sort of thing. Well, environmental stories, our founder Frank Allen likes to say, they don't break, they ooze. And because they ooze, they're harder to write about in an interesting way to the average reader. And so there's a bigger challenge for environmental journalists it takes more work to hook in the reader. And so one of the things we try to do on our fellowships, and as the industry seems to be in this contraction, is we not only take them out in the field, but we try to teach them how to write environmental stories in an interesting way. I mean, how do you write your 6th climate change story in a way that is new to the reader? That's a tough challenge. It's doable, but it's not as easy as just there was a fire on Main Street and 5 houses burned and that kind of a thing.
I think we ought to get some of the journalists to try and live on the amount of water that a lot of Africa lives on in a day. The way big city mayors sometimes live on the same level that the people on the projects would live in, which is about a gallon, did I see on one of the slides, or 2 average gallons per day that we use in the United States is 100. And the average gallons.
Well, how about getting up in the morning and walking 8 miles to get the
carry
water,
your water,
and then carry it on your head on the way back, and do that 3 times during the day? That's a good start.
Yeah. Right. Let's take one last question, then we'll ask our 2 guests for one final thing. What do you want these people to do when they leave here tonight? Hi.
Hi. My question is, who controls water? Who owns it ultimately? Because you were talking about agriculture earlier, and it's easy to have a company like Monsanto patent seed, say, or oil stays in one place. But water is shared. It's flowing, aquifers are shared across state lines, country lines, etc. So who ultimately, as we come up with solutions, is going to make these decisions of what we're going to do ultimately?
It's a good question.
Don't you love it when the last question's a super complicated one? Yeah.
That's so easy, Peter's going to take that.
Well, there's an enormous global debate about this right now. Whether water is a commodity, whether water is a human right, whether the human right is for a certain limited amount of water, and there's a big struggle out there right now, and there's a big debate, and I don't know how it's ultimately going to shake out, but it's at the forefront of this entire water availability issue, and I think that people are increasingly becoming aware of water's preciousness so that they can even think to ask that question. And the more we ask that question, the more I think the answer is going to become clearer. But it's an extremely emotional issue right now. And if there's a lot of stuff online that's dealing with this debate, and there's a lot of legal cases domestically here in the United States about that. As I think many of you know, there's a bizarre bifurcation in the water legal system in the United States, basically west of the 100th meridian, west of Nebraska's nose. It's called the prior appropriation doctrine. It's sort of a first come, first use legal system. In the eastern United States, we have the reasonable use doctrine, which is very different, which means you're sort of a shared resource, et cetera. And so that alone, and the more you get into who ownership and this sort of thing, the more complex it gets, the more legal it gets, and it's very different depending on what nation you're in, or and even what, again, take the United States, what part of what nation you are in. But in many ways, it's unresolved globally in particular, I would say. I don't know about Professor Sachs.
Well, I think the answer is that every arrangement you can think about exists someplace, and the question is what kinds of arrangements actually can work. In most cases of river flow and glaciers and Great Lakes and so on, some kind of governmental system has some significant measure of control. What people's rights are to take water, to appropriate it, to drill wells, to take water from rivers is a very complicated question everywhere legally, and an increasingly contentious one.